Well, I'm going to demonstrate how my worm food processor works. We're going to start with all of this, various types of food waste, a lot of bananas, there's potatoes, there's corn husks, various things. Now in another video I described exactly what that is. There's some broccoli over there, and we weighed this and we found out that there's about 14.6 pounds or 5.25 kilos of this organic waste, and we're going to process that and chop it all up. Well, you can't do that in a blender. It would just take forever if you were trying to use a home blender. That would just doesn't work. So we built this worm food processor, and again in that other video you'll see more of how that works. But just as a quick example, there's a garbage disposal here and a water pump that circulates the water through in this tank, and there's about 12 gallons of water in there, and then we're going to process that through. I got a couple of buckets to collect my food as it comes out, the ground up food, and they do have holes in them, so it drains the water. And well, let's just get started and grind up some food. Alright, so let's start the water, and I'm going to start the pump, I mean the grinder. Okay, so turn that water down a little bit. There we go. Let's start off with some bananas. Just grab a handful of this stuff. I usually almost fill this up because it goes pretty fast. And then you just kind of take one hand and push it down in there. Some bananas and stuff, whatever I pushed in there that first time, bananas and potatoes, and this is what comes out. So we put that in there, just keep this kind of cleaned up, let the water keep draining and circulating, and off we go. So I'm going to fast forward this and just get this all done. As I discussed in another video, we get this foaming after a while. You start getting enough of the organic material and the air mixing in, and it starts to foam. So we have to kind of handle that. So occasionally we have to turn off the pump. Not very often, but I wanted to stop and talk about this. And you may have noticed that I keep cleaning this in this way, and that's just to keep the screen clean and let the water go ahead and drain through. And so I've got these different areas that I keep moving through, and they have a little bit of material in them. Sometimes they have a lot of material in them, but you got to keep that little 1/4 inch mesh, or 1/8 inch mesh this is, you got to keep that clean. So you just kind of keep sifting through this stuff, and eventually the water, once you find a good break in it, then the water will drop through. There we go. That's much better. And sometimes I have to clean it pretty hard, and then there we go. That's the water will start draining a lot better. And once that happens, then we can start the process again. I keep this piece loose in case there's a real big backup in the garbage disposal, and it gets too much pressure built up, and this will pop off, and then it dumps the material. It's kind of a double-edged sword because sometimes it just falls off. But generally this seems to work real well. I'm thinking about putting a small clamp on it, but we'll see what happens. I kind of like it like this. I melted this, as you'll see in another video about the Ecuadorian magic trick. These tubes were the same size, and now this one fits over the other one. So watch that video and see how that works. Well, let's get this started again. Well, as happens more often than I'd like, the breaker popped on the garbage disposal just before I finished. I was really loading it pretty heavy, and it runs usually about 30 minutes, and then it gets too hot, even with the water running. So I have to wait for that to cool down, which will take probably another 30 minutes to an hour. But anyway, you should see what we've got and how this works. We've got just a little bit of material left over out of that 14 and a half pounds, 14.6, 5.25 kilos. You can see that how the water will foam, and you need to make sure that you start with clean water in the tank, and then you'll get a lot more processed. But after some period of time, it starts foaming, and it just continues to foam all the time. And make sure you've got some buckets that it will drain well, and then always have enough to be able to do that. I'm going to go ahead and measure what we've got, but I'm going to wait for it to get dry, because right now it's going to be very heavy because it's so full of water. But you can see that the size of this is much better than when we started, where this was kind of bulked over, and now we've got these two little bins, and this will feed the worms for a week. So I'm going to let this dry. I'll go ahead and let this cool off and finish processing everything, and then we'll come back and we'll show the measurement of how much weight we actually have out of this after it's dried somewhat. Right now, as you can see, it's still very moist. Even the stuff that has been sitting there for a while, it's just too wet really to put in with the worms. But I'll let this dry. I usually let this dry a day or two, and then I feed them. So we feed them on Monday usually. So I got a little bit of time for this to dry out, and we'll see that.